This month, it will have been 10 years since I left my job at Lamborghini Atlanta. And when I did, I really had no idea what was going to be next. I just kind of knew that that chapter of my career, it was time for it to come to a close. And so I left without knowing what my next job might be. In fact, at the time, I thought that I was going to take a job running leasing programs for Lamborghini, Bentley, and Bugatti under Porsche Financial Services at their headquarters down by the Atlanta airport. And I was kind of excited because that meant that I would have like a proper salaried 40-hour-a-week job that you couldn't take home at night or on the weekends, and that would be very confined to work hours. Because I was a little bit worn down, particularly since we had a new young kid at home, and it was just harder being young parents and trying to figure out the balance. And I'd recognize certainly that in the car world, in the car business, limiting your work hours is a huge challenge and almost impossible to find the kind of work-life balance that a lot of people search for. And so travel and days off and things like that were never really encouraged. There wasn't a lot of infrastructure or culture in place, and this was not unique to my dealership. Just car dealerships in general aren't designed to make it easy to take time off. If you are off a day, you don't do the deals of that day, you don't finish the deals of yesterday, you don't start the deals of tomorrow, and so it's really just a hard thing to balance. And so I knew that I didn't want to be a lifer in that kind of thing. And even though my title was Lamborghini or McLaren sales director, I was really just a glorified car salesman, and that's okay. I loved it. I really enjoyed the day-to-day transactional aspects. And, if I'm honest, I think it would have been perfect for me to be able to move up within a dealership organizational structure to become a sales manager, general manager, all these things. But in reality, because of the size of our store and the uniqueness of the way exotic car stores operated, there really wasn't anywhere for the people above me to go. Not because of qualification, but just because being really good at running a Lamborghini dealership doesn't mean that you're necessarily invited to all the other jobs that larger car dealership groups might have. So for instance, in most car dealerships, your finance manager, your GSM, everybody's moving back and forth to different places that are all under the same corporate umbrella because they own a lot of different stores. But one of the issues that surfaced as I was going through the hiring process with Porsche Financial Services was the pay cut. Now, I went into this knowing what they wanted to pay, totally eyes open, but it was about a 70% pay cut relative to what I had been making at the dealership. And at the time, I was certainly one of, if not the highest paid exotic car salespeople in the US. It was a great opportunity. I was making great money. I had saved a lot of money, and they were worried that I would just come in, do it for a couple of weeks and think it wasn't worth my time and leave. And I told them, look, I understand this is really a change that I'm kind of excited to make. I want to have a little bit more structure in my work life so that I can have a little bit more availability in my personal life, and this feels like a good thing. I also really like that theoretically it was third in line to becoming the president of Lamborghini North America, a job that I thought would be a whole lot of fun and kind of, again, exist in the US side of the Volkswagen Group organizational chart. And so after some back and forth, really they just said, we don't believe you're going to do it. And I said, okay, and went on to just experiment and eventually find the idea of VINwiki. But one of the things and the pieces of advice that I give to people that are looking to get ahead in life, particularly when you're starting from just normal job life, you're not coming from a lot of money or anything, you're going to work your way up and earn your way in this world, is that you have to find an opportunity just like I did with highly variable income. And that sounds a little bit counterintuitive because there's obviously going to be some really bad months. But generally speaking, if you develop a lifestyle around a variable pay plan where your compensation changes every single month, you have to budget around what a really bad month looks like. And that means that in a really good month, you wind up with a really big surplus. And so my advice to anybody, and my observation in the people that I have seen become very successful, is that they went through at least a meaningful season of their personal career life where they had highly variable income, generally commission-based sales. And so I had no base, I had no paid time off. I've never had like a salary or even an hourly wage other than working at the racing school for a summer after high school. But I realized that this was the right way for me to save a lot of money. Now, of course, you can save it, you can invest it, or you can spend it recklessly and frivolously on whatever it is that you might want, because it does come in these large tranches that just happen every month. And so sometimes it's a great month and many times it's a bad month. But generally speaking, I was making 25 to 50 grand every month that I went in there. and it was wonderful. I was having great cars and playing with great cars. And when I started to make content on the VINwiki YouTube channel, a lot of people were asking, since a lot of the stories were about my time at Lamborghini Atlanta, like, why would you leave this dream job? And in most senses, it is truly a dream job. You're getting to play with cars, learn about cars, you're in the network of people that are on a day-to-day basis really making the decisions that impact this kind of industry. And so it was really a very personal decision. And I was there from 2009 to 2015. And when we started, we were really just Lamborghini, Lotus, and then kind of Spyker. They weren't making cars anymore. We added the Aston Martin franchise, and I sold a whole bunch of those. We added the McLaren franchise, and I sold a whole bunch of those. And I loved getting to know the product. I loved helping customers kind of fulfill these automotive dreams, work out the financing, figure out their trades, kind of manufacture deals from scratch. I was successful in it. I loved it, and I had a blast. You just could never, ever turn it off. And I knew there was no more vertical mobility. And I knew at the time that the owner of our dealership was trying to sell it. And I knew that for me personally, being the most expensive item on the balance sheet, that my job might be in jeopardy at that point. Also, I had bought the Verdi Ithaca manual LP640 about, 6-8 months prior, and I knew that it was going to be a huge win when I ever cashed out of that car, well over 6 figures, which ultimately it was. And if I had done that inside of this dealership ecosystem, it would have ruffled a lot of feathers, because that was more than we made on any car the entire time that I was there. And of course, even if they got mad, they didn't want to buy the car for what I paid for it when I did. They didn't ask me to. They wouldn't have if I had said, hey, I think you guys should buy this car. And so it was all on the up and up. Everybody was fine, but it was always going to be uncomfortable to watch any employee have a win like that. So in that final year, I generally knew, is today the day I'm going to quit this job? And I wasn't expecting to be fired or anything like that. But there were a few deals that really kind of were those incremental tipping points, and any of them in themselves either almost were or certainly could have been the straw that broke that camel's back. But there was a deal where we were selling a very, very desirable car to a repeat customer who had dreamt of having that car, but from his new car purchasing history and from his financial ability, was not really in a position to be allocated and to buy one of these cars. And so I knew that he wanted one, and I had figured out a way that we could kind of weave in an extra allocation, but we also had to deal with him trading up several cars, because if for any reason you kind of don't line up as the perfect customer for an exotic car finance arrangement, one of the ways that you cheat it is by having a bunch of big payments and several good deals that are paid perfectly leading up to the application for that deal. So he'd had a couple of cars that were about half the money, 75%, all the way up till the price of the car that he was looking to ultimately own and enjoy. And when that car finally came in, what ultimately happened is that because of the trades and the loyalty and all this stuff, he asked for a huge discount on the most desirable car on earth at that point. And I simply told him no. I said, I'm sorry, I appreciate everything about it, but you're getting to buy this car at MSRP. Obviously, we make money at MSRP, but that's not how this needs to work. And behind the scenes, my concern with that was that this customer was very vocal about everything that he did, both on social media, even though it wasn't as big at that point as it is today, and with all the friend group, most of whom were better customers of ours and already had these cars. And if we were to discount the car in any form, I knew that it would immediately become very, very public, and I knew that would not be in the best interest of what I was trying to accomplish in holding the whole market of these cars up. Because if everybody starts hearing, hey, so-and-so got a big discount on this car, they're going to start thinking their cars are less valuable, which they weren't. But ultimately what happened is that he went around me to our general manager, whined to him, and he was granted the discount that he wanted, and he immediately started telling everyone about that he'd gotten this extraordinary deal on this hard-to-get car. And that caused exactly what I anticipated: a lot of people getting concerned, a lot of people bringing their cars in to consign for sale because they were worried that the bottom was falling out of the market. And of course, when there is so much more supply, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it did kind of have the same kind of domino effect that I feared. And I just, it was one of those deals that I was like, man, I knew what would happen. I didn't want this to happen. I could have sold the car to 10 other people in 5 minutes if they would have let me, but whatever, we moved on. Another deal that really upset me was kind of based on an inherent pathology of having a small sales team at a dealership like this. And there were 2 or 3 of us that were long-termers that had been there for a while, but then there was a lot of turnover in the other seats on the sales floor. And so they'd hired a person who I felt was very, very underqualified for the role. There wasn't a lot of product knowledge there, not a lot of great customer care, just didn't deal well with other people. And there was a situation on a pre-owned McLaren deal where I had the car sold, had a deposit in hand, the car showed as pending on our board, and there was a plane flight booked for the next day or two for this guy to come in and pick up his car. And this new salesperson didn't understand that the car was sold, and so pulled it back around front to give a test drive to somebody who came in looking for something similar. And the guy wanted to buy it. Our management staff decided to let the car be sold in person that day, and not only sold it out from under my deal, but mine also my customer. But I had to then go to them with the bad news that we had not respected the deposit that they had given us to hold the car. And I just felt terrible, and I thought it was a bad look. It was just not the right way for any of us to have gone about that deal, and that upset me pretty meaningfully. There was another situation where we had a weird title issue in a car that I sold because I was told that it was still new, had actually been titled, and it became an utter nightmare. And that's a long story that I probably can't even tell for another day. But those 3 deals, each time I was just like, man, I just don't know how much longer I can take this. But in addition to each of those kind of microcosms of dissatisfaction with my job at the time, there was really just an underlying current that I didn't like the cars nearly as much anymore. I remember going to the launch of the Huracan at Imola in Italy with Lamborghini, and when I got off the track, I think I probably had more of them pre-sold than any other dealership or certainly another salesperson on earth, and they were very keen to hear my thoughts, and I said, you know, look, it's beautiful, it's everything we need it to be from a commercial perspective, but it's one of the most boring cars that I've ever driven. I mean, certainly it's fast, but it's electronic transmission, electronic brakes, electronic steering, electronic suspension. Everything is electronic on the car, and it just feels very numb. I mean, I get that we'll be able to sell tens of thousands of these cars, as ultimately they were able to do, but I was not really excited personally to own and enjoy one of these cars. And the same was true for the Aventador product. There was just nowhere for the people that I had in these cars to keep trading up. I had sold so many McLarens that I knew were depreciating so catastrophically and breaking on a daily basis that it was going to be hard to get any of these customers out. And I recognized early on that the way I would make a good living in this industry was through having quality repeat customers. And I knew that I could manage 100 to 150 clients, making sure that I could talk to them a couple times a month and stay really in touch and on top of what they had, what they wanted, what they dreamt about, and be able to make deals out of nothing, just selling new cars or finding cars for all these people. And so when so many of them were in cars that I really wasn't sure that I was ever going to be able to trade, I knew that my business in that way was sort of in jeopardy. And so it was a lot of factors sort of culminating. And one day I just walked into my boss's office and said, hey, I think it's time. And he looked at me, he's like, really? I said, yeah, I think that's it. He said, okay. I said, well, I'm happy to stay around a couple weeks. He said, yeah, don't worry about it. Just pack up your stuff, whatever. Stop by and see us. And I have a few times over the years, but it was a very clean break and it was all very friendly. The owner called and he was like, yeah, what was it? I said, I don't know, just kind of a lot of stuff. Just isn't for me anymore, but I certainly appreciated the opportunity. I was very thankful for everything that I learned, the stories that I've gotten, the credit I was able to build personally, and all the knowledge that I got from working at Lamborghini Atlanta. This month of VINwiki content is brought to you by Bridgestone, and one thing that I never would have seen coming when I was working at Lamborghini Atlanta selling brand new cars was Bridgestones on them from new. And Bridgestones are now original equipment on all new Revueltos. They were on Aventador Ultimae, Sterrato, Estio. They are the go-to tire for new Lamborghinis today, and I think that is super cool. The technology that they're putting into it is everything that they need, and they displaced Pirelli's, 40, 50, 60-year relationship with Lamborghini as a brand, and I just think that's an amazing achievement for Bridgestone as a tire supplier, as a company, and I love the way the cars drive on those tires. They don't have a fitment yet for a Bugatti or a Mercy, but they are working every day to make the best tires possible. And for you to check out the latest from Bridgestone, please click the link in the description below to thank them for their support of VINwiki and find a set of Bridgestone tires that are perfect for your car.